Back in 2019, a YouTube channel called It's Okay to Be Smart, later named to simply Be Smart, made a video titled 7 Scientific Urban Legends Debunked. This video was about how, despite science's efforts to root them out, sometimes baseless ideas still make it into the body of what is considered to be common knowledge in science. This video appropriately ends with the presenter offering solutions to the problem. However, the main solution offered was to take down the paywall that so many scientific papers are stuck behind. The presenter then offered plenty of support for the assertion that doing this would go a long way in the fight against scientific misinformation. Frankly, I do agree that this is an attractive solution. However, it is easier said than done. I will explain why in just a moment. Hello Internet, this is Sophia, the Red Angel, doing my best on this channel to produce content that is worth your time to watch and listen to. Today I am discussing a proposal made by the YouTube channel Be Smart that scientific articles should be taken from behind a paywall so that the general public can have more access to them. Frankly, this was not the first time I heard this suggestion. I have heard it before from other YouTubers that I very much respect, and every one of them offered strong arguments as to how doing this could help very much in the fight against scientific misinformation. Unfortunately, as far as I am aware, not one of those making the suggestion has broached the topic of why these papers are behind a paywall to begin with, let alone discuss how the costs of maintaining the scientific publications that they go through can be covered without having the paywall in place. And given what for many years I did for a living, I can assure you that those costs are considerable in ways that other people might not even fully appreciate, from the scientists themselves to famed science communicators. For well over a decade, I worked for a company that provided many back-end services for the organizing of scientific conferences. If you were a scientist wishing to make a presentation at one of those conferences, you would get on your web browser and submit your paper for consideration using a program that I wrote. Then, using the same program, a group of reviewers approved by the conference organizers would check out your paper for review. You've heard about the importance of the peer review in the scientific process, have you? Well, I can assure you that every one of the YouTubers that I have seen call for an end to the paywall has heard of it, and that were it not for the fact that they've probably never heard of my YouTube channel, every one of them would happily back me up in saying that the peer review process is an absolute essential that the scientific process cannot do without. Well, this pre-publication review is a very important part of that. Anyway, upon going through your paper, these reviewers would submit their comments along with a vote expressing where they stand on the fitness of your paper for publication. They would do this directly into the fields associated with your submission to the paper submission program. Then, depending on the specific conference, you might have an opportunity to make revisions to your paper, followed by a second review phase. After all that, based on the feedback from the reviewers, the conference organizers would determine which papers were and were not approved for presentation at the conference. Depending on the conference, this final step can also be subjected to varying degrees of automation that would be based on the votes submitted by the reviewers. And for well over a decade, I made a living designing, maintaining, and operating a program that was the computer back end of these functions for a relatively small number of scientific conferences. I can only imagine that the equivalent program for a scientific journal would be even more complex. In every conference that I was involved with at any time, all of the papers would be in the abstract submission phase, or all of the papers would be in the same phase of review, and so forth. A journal, on the other hand, would have to contend with some papers being in one phase, while other papers are in a different phase. Still more papers are in yet another phase. And no doubt there are chums like me out there whose jobs are to make sure it all goes smoothly. And those chums have living expenses that must be met. Someone has got to pay them. And then there are the other costs of maintaining a journal, from maintaining the archives to just keeping the lights on. And this requires money. And without a paywall, the money is going to have to come from somewhere else. So, where exactly? I'm sure that the likes of Google and Facebook, if not those very companies, then others like them, would love to set up an advertisement-supported service that does this. But is this really a better alternative than the paywall? Do you want to trust a completely opaque algorithm designed of, by, and for a private corporation to determine which papers you find first, or even which papers you find at all when you do a search for these archives? I sure do not. I want the program that determines the results of these searches to be as transparent as possible, open to as much scrutiny as the scientific papers themselves. And I have good reason to hope that the YouTubers that I see calling for an end to the paywall can appreciate the importance of this. And also, under such an advertisement-supported system, what would be with the papers that could potentially make the advertisers uncomfortable? There would be a strong incentive to make such papers the target of suppression, and that is not something that anyone who values scientific integrity should want. So then, if an advertisement-supported alternative to the paywall is not the solution, how about public funds? Well, that could work as long as the government has the restraint to do so without compromising the independence of these publications. But can we count on that always being the case? During the Trump administration, it was made perfectly clear that this is not something that we can count on. As a matter of fact, in the YouTube video description area of this video, you can find a link to a Wikipedia article that summarizes the many interferences that the Trump administration did with the scientific process. Just imagine how much farther this damage might have gone if journals such as Nature or the New England Medical Journal depended on the federal funds for their expenses. Even worse, if they were themselves federal agencies whose bosses Trump could fire on a whim if he so chose to do. By no means am I one of those small government libertarians or fiscal conservatives who want to keep the government out of everything and anything, but there are some things that truly do need to be kept independent of the government if they are to have the integrity that they need. And the management of the scientific archives and scientific review process is one of those things. Clearly, public funding is not the solution to funding the costs of maintaining these journals without a paywall. Am I saying that we should just throw our hands up and abandon the idea of removing these paywalls just because there is no quick and easy solution how to do this? No, I do not. While I appreciate the cost of maintaining the currently indispensable journals in ways that many people do not seem to, I also do happen to agree that the fight against scientific misinformation requires that we find a solution. Whether the solution be an alternative way to pay for the expenses of these journals without such a paywall, or a less expensive alternative that could fulfill all of the essential functions that we have thus far depended on these journals for. But finding a solution by either of those means is not going to be easy, and it would be premature to do away with the paywall until such a solution is found. So no, I do not oppose the idea of taking down the paywalls that keep so many people from accessing the scientific papers. But I do challenge everyone who calls for such a change to start contributing to the discussion of how to make this change economically feasible. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, ring the bell, and check out any of the other videos I have on this channel. And until next time, see ya!